Hi, I'm Adim, and today I will be talking about the series that really needs no introduction, Resident Evil.
Resident Evil.
Releasing the original Resident Evil trilogy on GOG was a collective dream coming true, marking the end of a 12-year quest to finally make it happen. On the technical side, this was also one of our most challenging projects. The original PC versions of those games hadn't aged well and were in a rough technical state. From the very beginning, our goal was to deliver the highest quality possible, giving Capcom's most important franchise the respect it deserves. But things got quite rough right from the start when it turned out that two of the three titles would not even launch on modern systems. The initial blocker, a 3D renderer that was a literal relic of the Windows 95 era. Looking at the code, we discovered that Resident Evil 1 relies on the earliest Direct 3D 3.0 version that could possibly exist. Therefore, a full emulation was required, faithfully reintroducing features like command queues, alpha transparency modes, depth buffers, color keying, geometry, clipping, and lighting. Once we had that out of the way, we could start introducing some quality of life improvements, like Windows mode, image scaler, brightness control, and an optional anti-aliasing. However, that wasn't enough to get the game running. Further analysis showed that the game's settings could not be stored or read from the Windows registry, so we had to remap the root folder for those entries to another location. And did the game run after we did that? Nope. To our surprise, the game stayed dead. Diving back into the code, we discovered that it was using a set of privileged instructions, something that would be very rarely used in an executable files. And only after stripping those out of the way, we had our first Eureka moment. Not a very long one though, because as soon as the game booted, our technicians were greeted by a cinematic that was roughly the size of a postage stamp. Fortunately, that turned out to be an easy fix. And after a few tweaks, we could see the Capcom logo exactly as it was meant to be seen. We were ready to jump in, but when we started the initial testing phase across different machines, there was another puzzle waiting for us. The character selection screen would cycle endlessly, looping through options even though we weren't touching any controls. This problem proved to be much more complex. After reverse engineering the code, we found out that the game didn't handle key bindings properly. The title would populate some of the slots with random values, which in turn was interpreted as releasing and pushing buttons repeatedly. More bugs awaited us during actual gameplay. For instance, the game would erratically track time during cutscenes. This would result in a complete freeze. We had to be very careful with our adjustments, as Resident Evil 1 runs on two different frame rates. It's 30 FPS during gameplay, but it switches to 60 FPS during room transitions. Fixing the timings made it possible to start regular gameplay sessions, testing the overall stability of the build. And we are still not done. Imagine our surprise when, while processing through the story, the engineers were greeted with Chris's shotgun made entirely out of wood.
NANI?!
It turns out that the PC version had the texture coordinates wrong for the shotgun model, so we manually tweaked that asset to fix it. Then we moved to redesigning controller support. We knew that beyond providing native support for modern controllers, like Sony DualSense, Xbox Series or Nintendo Switch Pro, we would also want to give players access to features not available in classic titles. One of those features would be hot plugging, which allows players to plug in or switch gamepads without the need to turn off the game beforehand. Another was support for wireless connections. Combining this with optimized button mapping was essential to keep the game smooth and comfortable on a modern hardware. Moving to the second title. Here, even more bugs were lurking under the surface, starting from the video playback all the way to the save system. But what was least expected was an invisible item lying on the bed, even though it was never collected. Analyzing the game's assets, we discovered that the masks in this particular room was incorrectly layered. You see, games with pre-rendered backgrounds often use those cutouts or masks to tell the engine the exact order in which elements should be displayed. Once we corrected the layer order, the item would start showing up again, exactly where it was supposed to be. Sound engine also proved to be quite problematic. Apart from issues with volume settings and audio panning, another problem was the absence of music tracks in certain locations. Like, for example, the area near the police station. While in the PlayStation version, the music would be playing in those locations, the PC version had a bug that needed fixing in order to keep parity between platforms. The vent fan sound in the sewers would also loop incorrectly. And on top of that, in the non-English versions of the game, the voice lines were completely out of sync with the subtitles.
Sorry about that. When I saw the uniform, I thought you were another zombie.
Who are you?
Ada Wong.
The German version of the game had a particular bug where the endgame video was incorrectly compressed, resulting in a strange yellow tint instead of intended gray on the credit subtitles. It's worth pointing out that for those games, each language version is essentially its own separate game, with its own separate executable and assets. So in case of Resident Evil 2, every single fix that we made had to be recreated 12 times. But wait, if there are 6 language versions of Resident Evil 2, so why is it 12? Well, in PC version, the scenarios for Leon and Claire were actually separate builds of the game as well. This is why we want to give massive kudos to the GOG QA team, who worked tirelessly testing each and every build in several revisions. We would also like to thank Capcom QA team, who was a huge help in making sure that the quality was consistent across the board. Moving on to Resident Evil 3. Even though the culmination of Nemesis' story had significantly fewer gameplay bugs than Resident Evil 2, and seemed to be working right off the bat, it actually turned out to be the most problematic one. The overall technical state of the game was the worst of the whole trilogy. We documented over a dozen different scenarios where the game would simply freeze. A lot of bugs were also waiting for us in the user's interface and options menu. Like with 2 other titles, here we also decided to focus fully on emulating the graphics and enabling modern controller supports. But in the case of Resident Evil 3, the controller support first needed to be enabled in the game itself by fixing the detection system. We tested the game so much that we even found a bug involving a special thank you message that was supposed to trigger after finishing the game for the 8th time. And yes, we have beaten the game back to back that many times during our development. The GOG community also played a vital role in bringing this title back. They pointed out that the blood had a strange purplish tint compared to what they remembered. Thanks to this feedback, we were able to correct it, make it intense red once again. We tracked down every available localization of the game and made sure that the additional Mercenaries mode was included in all of them. We also fixed the statistics system, ensuring that the data would be shared between this mode and the story mode. In the whole trilogy, consisting of 18 unique builds and 28 unique executable files, we introduced nearly 3,000 bug fixes. And that's it. I hope you've been able to spend great time with those classics. If you haven't had the opportunity to play them yet, let me assure you that it is more than worth it. These titles set new standards for the industry, not losing too much of their timeless appeal. See ya!